At first, nothing felt wrong. Mornings arrived the same way they always had. Conversations sounded familiar. Smiles were exchanged without effort. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have believed that nothing had changed at all. That's how quiet shifts begin. Disguised as normalcy. No warnings, no tension, just a subtle difference you can't quite name. I moved through my days comfortably, trusting the rhythm I had known for years, unaware that my place within it was already being quietly adjusted. People spoke around me the way they always had. But something was missing. Pauses. Those small spaces where your opinion naturally fits. Where someone turns and asks, "What do you think?" Those pauses were gone. Conversations flowed smoothly without them. And because everything sounded calm, I didn't question it right away. Sometimes the most significant changes arrive without noise, and by the time you notice them, they've already settled in. I told myself I was imagining things. That familiarity can change shape without meaning anything. That comfort doesn't always require involvement. But deep down, a quiet awareness began forming. Something had shifted, and no one felt the need to explain it. And when everything feels normal on the surface, it becomes harder to recognize when you're slowly being left out.
When I finally noticed I wasn't being included, it wasn't done harshly. No one said, "You don't belong here." Instead, there were reasons, gentle ones, practical ones, the kind that sound thoughtful if you don't listen too closely. "You've been busy lately. You probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. We didn't want to bother you." I nodded when they spoke. I smiled to show understanding. After all, who argues with logic delivered so politely? But inside, something felt off. These excuses appeared too often, always arriving before I could ask a question. They filled the space where honesty should have been. What troubled me was I noticed how quickly conversations moved on after the excuses were given. No pause, no follow-up, no invitation to respond. That's when it became clear. The reasons weren't meant to be understood. They were meant to be accepted. And I did accept them. Not because they felt right, but I didn't discover the plans because someone told me. I found out by accident, through half-finished sentences, lowered voices, and conversations that suddenly stopped when I entered the room. It wasn't secrecy, it was assumption. There was a strange calm in the way they spoke, confident, settled, comfortable. These weren't new ideas. They had been discussed before, agreed upon, and accepted. Just not with me. No one looked uneasy, no one hesitated. There was a strange calm in the way they spoke, confident, settled, comfortable. These weren't new ideas. They had been discussed before, agreed upon, and accepted. Just not with me. No one looked uneasy. No one hesitated. I could have asked questions. I could have stepped in and reminded them that I was still there. But I didn't. Because suddenly, I saw the truth clearly. These plans were never meant to include my voice. Asking would only force them to explain something they had already settled. So I stayed quiet, not out. I didn't ask much, just small questions, careful ones, the kind meant to understand, not to challenge. I chose my words gently, making sure my tone stayed calm. But the room changed anyway. Not dramatically, just enough for me to. The answers came shorter now. Less detailed, spoken with polite patience that felt rehearsed. "We've already discussed it. It's not important right now. Don't worry about it." Each response carried the same message. This conversation wasn't meant to continue. I noticed how quickly they moved on once my question was answered. No space for follow-up, no curiosity about my thoughts. That was the moment I understood. Questions are only welcome when your place in the conversation is secure. Mine wasn't. The smiles were still there. Warm, polite, almost reassuring. If someone were watching from the outside, they would have thought everything was fine. That's what made them so convincing. Smiles can soften the hardest truths. They can turn final decisions into something that feels. Their expressions never wavered. Calm faces, gentle voices, no tension to push against. That's when I realized the smiles weren't meant to comfort me, they were meant to avoid discomfort for them, a way to keep things pleasant while moving forward without resistance. I watched closely then, not for words, but for certainty, and I saw it in how confidently they spoke, in how quickly they changed topics. These weren't ideas anymore, they were conclusions.
It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment I could point to and say, this is when it started. Instead, it unfolded slowly, quietly, almost politely. I noticed my role shrinking. Tasks I once handled were being done without me. Decisions I used to help make were already finalized by the time I heard about them. Nothing was taken from me directly. It was simply reassigned. What made it harder was how natural it seemed to everyone else. No guilt, no hesitation, just a smooth transition. As if my absence had already been practiced, I was still present, physically, still greeted, still acknowledged. But presence without participation is its own kind of disappearance. I realized then that removal doesn't always come with rejection. Sometimes it arrives disguised as efficiency. I could have fought it. I could have insisted on being included, reminded them of what I had contributed before. But something in me chose observation over resistance, because the truth was clear now. This wasn't temporary. It wasn't accidental. I wasn't being pushed out. I was being slowly replaced. Silence wasn't my first choice. It became my choice after I understood that speaking would change nothing. At first, staying quiet felt like weakness, like giving up ground I had once stood on confidently. I wondered if my silence made it easier for them to forget my role. But slowly I realized something important. Silence can also be a form of clarity. By staying quiet, I began to see more. Words stopped distracting me. Explanations no longer confused me. I noticed patterns. Who spoke? Who decided? Who no longer looked in my direction before moving forward? And in that quiet space, I felt something unexpected. Strength. Not loud or defiant, but steady and controlled. I was no longer reacting. I was observing. Silence gave me distance. And distance gave me understanding. I didn't need arguments to confirm what I already knew. I didn't need permission to feel what I felt. By choosing quiet, I protected my dignity. I saved my energy. And I stopped offering my voice where it was no longer valued.